I want to tell you that we are going to add some new information. Stan, do you agree? This is a double-door move. What would make a man not go to the funeral of his best friend of all time? Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were more than just funny people. People who lived long ago changed the very heart of entertainment. But there was stress, sadness, and silence that no one saw behind the laughing. Fans have been wondering for a long time why Stan never came to say goodbye to Hardy. The truth, though, is much sadder than anyone thought. The most famous comedy team. In every way, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were not the same. But together, they made the relationship that changed comedy for good. Two men, one tall and thin with a look of pure confusion frozen on his face. The other one was big and proud, like a man who thought he had everything under control until the world told him he didn't. They made a rhythm of humor that would be heard for generations. They were the most famous comedy team in Hollywood's golden age because of how well they worked together and how easy it was for them to cause chaos. But their personal lives were full of problems that didn't always get shown to the public. Behind the lights, scripts, and perfect slapstick acts, they had problems. They met for the first time in 1921, and no one could have known what that meeting would lead to. The Lucky Dog was the name of the small silent movie that didn't get much attention. Oliver played the thief, and Stan played a cruel man who was robbed by one. They didn't spend much time together, and neither of them could have thought that they'd become important parts of history. In those early years of Hollywood, when artists were just trying to make it, they went from one short film to the next, hoping to get paid and maybe get some attention. Stan Laurel grew up in a place that smelled like sawdust and grease paint. Born into a theater family, he was always interested in the stage lights. He joined Fred Karno's comedy group, which made Charlie Chaplin famous. Stan did work as Chaplin's student, who closely watched as Chaplin used small actions and silence to create whole worlds. It was a master class in telling stories through movement. And Stan didn't know it at the time, but those lessons would help him build everything else he made. Stan stayed behind while the band toured America to look for new film jobs. He went back and forth between small comedic parts and directing jobs, never quite figuring out who he was meant to be. But he learned about rhythm, framing, and how a single stop or look could bring a scene to life. These were the little things that would finally show how smart he was. Olivia Hardy's life was very different from ours, but it led him to the same place. Hardy began by singing in stages. He then moved on to vaudeville and finally to silent movies. He was called Babe by his friends because a barber called him that when he was younger. Both in size and attitude, he was bigger than life. In the early 1920s, he had already been in over 100 movies. He wasn't a big star, but he was a reliable supporting actor who could make any part distinctive. As soon as the Hal Roach Studios put Laurel and Hardy together in Pudding Pants on Phillip in 1927, something clicked. There was no forcing or making it happen. It was, of course. Hardy's big sense of self-importance went well with Laurel's weak, childlike wonder. Laurel would blink, tilt his head, and look sadly at the camera. Hardy, on the other hand, would roll his eyes, puff out his chest, and try to keep his cool while things were going wrong. It was like they spoke a different language when they were together. They made a fortune off of laughs over the next 20 years. They worked together on more than 107 movies, and every one of them was a master class in physical comedy. They didn't depend on conversation or quick jokes. Instead, they used rhythm, time, and feeling to make things funny. The Cuckoo Song, the movie's theme song, became one of the most famous songs in movie history. People could pay attention with just a few sounds, letting them know that chaos and charm were about to happen. Critics praised how well The Fool and the Frustrated Gentleman balanced the two extremes that were in it, making it a great comedy. People all over the world knew about them. People all over Europe loved them like they were folk heroes when they went on tour. In 2005, British comedians named them the 7th best comedy act of all time, after all these years. Proof that they had always been funny. But stories can't escape the passing of time. By the end of the 1940s, the world that used to love comedy was beginning to change. People wanted new and up-to-date forms of fun after the war. The magic that used to fill cinemas began to fade. Laurel and Hardy's last movie, Atoll K, came out in 1951, and the cracks were clear to see. The project was a mess from beginning to end. Both men were not feeling well. The story was bad, and it was even worse that the French and Italian crews couldn't talk to each other. The movie that came out of it couldn't live up to their reputation. This was the first time that the laughing didn't feel natural. It was the end of an age. It wasn't that they had lost their spark, but that the world had changed for them. Still, even after the cameras stopped rolling, they would stay close through happiness, sickness, and loss. For Stan Laurel, it meant making one last choice that he would not say, which would leave fans guessing for decades. Stan's private fights. Stan Laurel made everyone laugh, but his own life was often too much for him to handle. When he wasn't in front of the cameras, he was busy with work, relationships that were hard to understand, and a need for perfection that kept him from relaxing. A lot of the time, his problems began in his heart. Stan's love life had a lot of early successes that quickly turned into public trouble. He was married 5 times, but only to 4 women. One of them married him twice. The pattern looked a lot like a movie. It went back and forth between passion, misunderstanding, and collapse, like scenes from one of his own comedies. Before Warner Brothers knew him as half of Laurel and Hardy, Stan's first big relationship was with Australian actress and performer May Dahlberg. They worked together in theater and were together on and off stage for a while. May was brave, hard to predict, and often envious of Stan's rising fame. His real name was Arthur Jefferson, but she said she came up with the name Stan Laurel and got him to change it. Made more sense for show business. The tension stayed, but the name didn't. Stan's job quickly suffered because of May's appearance. She would often get in the way of his work by interrupting practices, making directors angry, and setting up awkward situations on set. The producers at Hal Roach Studios saw her as a risk, and Stan's chances started to get worse because of her image. By 1925, things were getting so bad that director Joe Rock made an amazing offer. He allegedly agreed to pay May a settlement, some say as much as $10,000, if she would leave Stan and stay out of the United States for good. She accepted, and for the first time in years, Stan could breathe. But that kind of closure doesn't erase the emotional wreckage it leaves behind. His later weddings didn't bring peace either. Stan got married to actress Lois Nilsson in 1926, and things seemed safe for a while. They were famous and worked long hours, which caused them to split up. Following their split, Stan married Virginia Ruth Rogers, but they later split up. He then married Russian opera singer Vera Shuvalova, but later went back to Ruth. It was a roller coaster of love, regret, and efforts to make things right. He wasn't mean or cold. He was just restless and always trying to find peace, but never was able to. Even when he was alone, Stan seemed to be truly married to his work. Oliver Hardy liked movies more casually and trusted the directors and writers to do their jobs. Stan, on the other hand, couldn't let go of control. He came up with all of their ideas. Everyone at Hal Roach Studios knew who was writing and directing the movies, even if they weren't given credit for it most of the time. He thought of new ways to make things funnier, sharper, and more perfect all the time. He wrote jokes, cut scenes, rewrote lines, and edited scenes. He was said to have spent hours in the editing room changing time by tenths of a second because he was sure that a single A pause in the wrong place could ruin the whole joke. His coworkers remembered how he would practice for hours on end and then throw out a whole scene if it didn't feel right. Stan's comedy wasn't based on chance or whim. It was building design. Every step, look, and pause was planned with great care. Part of what made Laurel and Hardy classic was how hard they worked to be great. But it cost something. He felt very responsible for what he did. Stan had to bring his work home with him, while Hardy could leave the studio and relax at a party or on the golf course. He was always drawing out ideas, rewriting lines, or calling editors late at night to fix something that was bugging him. When the pair was at the height of their fame, it became even more important to stay at that level. People always thought that Stan would be perfect, and he took that personally. His health started to show the stress over time. He got diabetes, and by the 1940s, heart problems were making him move less quickly. It was hard on him because of the long hours and mental stress, but he wouldn't give up. His job had become an important part of who he was. Even when he was too sick to act, he kept making sketches and notes for movies that were never made. The fame that used to make him feel good turned into a drag over time. Things were changing in Hollywood, and the entertainment he had built his career on was no longer the big deal. Sound movies, new styles, and a faster pace. Younger people thought the slow, intentional humor of the Laurel and Hardy era was out of date. Stan really felt it. He was heartbroken that something he loved and had worked so hard to build was going away. He laughed so hard that his heart hurt for every failure and every short-lived victory. But when the laughter stopped, he was left with a strange quiet that not many people could understand. That space of quiet, stress, and pain would soon become the setting for some of the funniest moments in history. The problems with the pair. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were the most famous idiots in the world. But life outside of movies was a lot more. It's more involved than the clean chaos they showed on camera. It was hard for even their closest friends to see past the rumors, bad choices, and emotional cracks that went along with their charm and comedic ease. When it came to his work, Stan Laurel had always been more serious than the other one. But that anger sometimes got into his personal life, where rumors about him often made it hard to tell the difference between fact and fiction. It was said that he drank more and more over the years. Some of his co-workers said he was depressed, especially when things didn't go as planned at work or in his relationships. The man who is known for setting up great scenes on set had, all of a sudden, he couldn't fix the mess in his own life. It was said that he spent more time alone and drank to dull the stress that came with both success and loss. His health wasn't great to begin with, and the stress of always coming up with new ideas made it worse. Insiders said the man was torn between being proud of his heritage and being afraid that it would become meaningless. People said he was hard to work with even when he was at his best. At Hal Roach Studios, some people said he was too bossy and wouldn't trust anyone else's opinion. He insisted on being in charge of everything, from the writing to the props, lighting, and even the costumes. Stan thought that comedy was a very crafty art. Form. Some people did not see it that way, though. There were rumors that Hardy's need to be perfect drove team members away and sometimes made him lose his cool. Some people thought it was oppression that looked like loyalty. Oliver Hardy had a lot of problems in his life. He did a good job of hiding them behind his friendly smile, but they were often in the news. He was married 3 times, but all of them ended in divorce. His second wife, Myrtle Reeves, was said to have had problems with drinking, and their relationship got worse over time. Friends talked about fights that left both of them tired. Hardy, although he was kind and quick to forgive, he was often stuck in loops of anger and shame. It was very clear that his calm behavior on TV was very different from the chaos at home. He also had money problems after that. He was too kind and generous, always helping people and spending a lot of money. But because he didn't pay attention to his money, he had a lot of problems with his taxes. In the 1930s and 1940s, artists who didn't know how to run a business were in for a rough time, and Hardy put his trust in people who didn't always have his best interests at heart. He sometimes owed the government a lot of money, and there were times when he had to do less important or important work to pay the bills. He didn't say much about it, but it got to him. People still saw them as the 2 likable men they played on TV, even though they were having problems. The purity of their characters had become what they were all about. Millions of fans saw them as more than just actors. They saw them as friends and easy happiness. That picture was so clear that few people could think that the 2 older comedians were actually having health problems, having trouble being creative, and seeing their fame slowly fade away. People didn't want to believe the rumors that they were fighting when they first came out. They had built up such a strong connection that it seemed impossible that they could fight. However, they were never together all the time.